Well, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for spending your Saturday morning with us. You're listening to WCCP 105.5 The Roar. Jay Smith, Bradley Kendall, Evan McDowell. Appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with us. Another edition of After Further Review. Final topic of today's show. Going to be a good one. We've kind of talked about some overrated programs across the country and what all that means. It's been a heated debate, a good debate. But last thing we want to talk about is Clemson, and specifically looking at the fact that they've really established themselves as an elite program, and just looking at have they had an elite couple of years, or are they now a blue blood program in college football? What does that mean for the school, and how they keep that up, and how they continue to defy expectations and not fall back into what some would call an overrated program. Bradley, you feel like Clemson has now been able to establish themselves as a premier school within college football?
Yeah, I think, like you said about defying expectations, I honestly think Clemson's a little more underrated than overrated. When you look at the past probably 5 to 10 years, Clemson's been kind of looked at just kind of in a mediocre eye, and I honestly disagree with that. I think Clemson has really risen to power and become one of probably the premier, maybe top 3, top 5 programs in America. I mean, if you just look in the last 5 years alone, we're 65-9, and we're going on our 4th straight potential ACC championship game. There's only one other team that can say that they have that they're going for 4 straight conference titles, and that's Oklahoma. And I would throw Oklahoma in probably the top 5 as well. So I think Clemson, there's a lot to back them up. A lot of people are going to want to talk about the whole Clemsoning issue. I think they've really kind of put that to bed. That's honestly more of a baseball thing now after what just transpired this past weekend. But football-wise, yeah, I think they're easily an elite program.
Well, Evan, I mean, Clemson in the last 5 years is 65-9, and the only school in the country that has a better record than that is Alabama. They're 64-6. So they're an elite company. I mean, they have better records than schools like Ohio State, Oklahoma, who Bradley just mentioned. So, I mean, do you feel like now that Clemson is a perennial powerhouse and able to compete for ACC championships year in, year out, how do they continue to you almost can't exceed expectations anymore, but just maintain the same consistency without becoming an overrated school? Because if they have one slip up, like Bradley said, that Clemsoning is going to come back into play, and you're going to have all sorts of people from down in Columbia pointing the finger.
Well, yeah, and I think that the whole Clemson thing, it became popular there in the late, early 2000s when we would crash and burn in the second half against teams that we had no business losing to. And to a certain extent, people are going to try to dig it up when we lose to a team, I don't know, like Syracuse or Pittsburgh, that kind of thing. But like Bradley said, we've kind of put that stereotype to bed. But I think what Clemson needs to do to stay at the top is to continue doing what's worked, and that is hit the recruiting trail hard and develop these kids, let experience take precedent as far as who's going to be your starter, who's going to lead your team, that kind of thing, and just maintain that same level of consistency that they've been able to reach these past couple of years, especially under Dabo Swinney for the better part of the last 10 years or so. I think we can stick him around, and Venables, these important parts that we've had over the last almost decade or so. If we can keep that level of consistency, the same people, the same attitudes, the same routines, that sort of thing, I think that's really going to go a long way down the road. As we've seen at schools like Alabama, like Ohio State, that level of consistency, it keeps you at the top for an extended period of time.
What do you think, Bradley, about the fact that Clemson has been, in the top 15 of recruiting rankings each of the last 10 seasons? I mean, that in and of itself, I think 15, 20 years ago would have been considered almost impossible, just because of not only the history of the program. Besides the 1980s, they really were never dominant, but also the location. I mean, you think about the location of Clemson as a school, and how difficult it sometimes is to convince kids to go to a school like Clemson. And I think also the social media side of the athletic department has greatly increased the interest from recruits from other areas of the country that have big name schools into possibly even considering Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you always look at is the national recognition and how Clemson's been able to kind of go beyond the borders of South Carolina. And I mean, just recently, this past year, recruiting-wise, we took the number 1 player from 6 different states in the Southeast. I mean, you think of the number of schools that are included that are at the top in those regions, that's a lot. The Tiger Paw right now is, the most recognizable college brand probably in the entire country. And like you said with social media, Clemson's football program as a whole has become hip. It's become in. It's become a place where kids are really excited to go to. And I think not only that, but they're backing up their recruiting rankings with success on the field. I mean, a lot of teams will get, great recruits like a team like Notre Dame or Florida State and then finish outside the top 10, at the end of the season. Clemson's probably, I think right now I got them as the fourth most top 10 finishes in the last 10 years behind schools like Alabama, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. And that says a lot, not only that you're able to get talent, but that you're able to do stuff with it. I think that says a lot about the coaching staff and the program as a whole, honestly.
Well, Evan, too, I think another point is the fact that when they get high-level talent, those five-star guys, some of them stick around. I mean, you could look at the defensive line and how much success that we all know that they're going to have in the NFL, and their decision to come back and spend another year at Clemson was, huge for the program. But then also, you've almost got so much of an oversaturation of talent now that you see five-star quarterbacks, as we discussed last week, transferring away from the program. So I think that now, Clemson has really established themselves as, like Bradley says, an in-school. It's the place to go. It seems to be resonating with guys, especially they resonate with Coach Sweeney. So I think that all plays a part of the brand that is Clemson football.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think another big part of it, like I think both of you have touched on already, is that next level success, as you mentioned, Jay, with the defensive line and the predicted success that they're going to have at the next level. I think that goes a long way, too. Even as a high school recruit, you're thinking, where for the next couple of years is going to be good for me, but also down the road, if I go to this school, is it going to help me at the next level? And I think you're seeing a lot of Clemson talent transitioning to the NFL and becoming a pipeline, just like in Alabama, just like in Ohio State. And that's why you can swing these big recruits, and you can also not inhibit their ability to transition into an NFL system. And that's kind of like we talked about with Michigan earlier. They pull these great recruits, and then they maybe underperform a little bit at the college level, and then that doesn't necessarily help them going forward. So I think a lot of it is professional development. And I think Coach Sweeney and his staff put a big emphasis on that. And so, you show these high school kids, hey, you come here, you're going to be good while you're here. You're also going to be good after you're here. I think that goes a long way.
I agree, and I think one of the biggest perks or one of the biggest things about the Clemson football program that shows kids that they can make it after they leave the school, regardless of whether or not if it's in football, is Paul Journey. And one of our good friends, Thomas Marshall, he's been a part of Paul Journey, and just hearing some of the stories from him and some of the people that they bring in to talk to these guys, these young players from all around the country, and kind of mold them into young men, men of character. And I know that's really important to Coach Sweeney and the rest of the coaches at Clemson. But that Paul Journey program that they've established, I really think is one of the best things that Clemson has done off of the field, because there's so much that can be said about the talent and the success on the field. But as with most great programs, a lot of times it's what you're doing off the field that really makes the difference. And I think, Bradley, you can comment on this, what their facilities and the development of their facilities while Dabo's been there have meant to the program.
Oh, the facilities have been the number one focus, I think, over the last couple years alone since Clemson's real success started. Dabo and the university as a whole have just poured so much money into it and made it a real focal point to try and attract guys. Because it's one thing to say, hey, we've done all this winning, we've done all this stuff over the last few years, all the hardware. But when you can show them a great place that they're going to live for the next 3 to 4 years and spend the majority of their days in, that resonates a lot. That says a lot. I think another important fact that you got to bring up is that Dabo has been able to relate to a lot of guys. You see just with Hunter Renfrow, that's the first guy that pops into my head. He can relate to a lot of guys because he's been there before. Nick Saban, it's been a while since he played college ball. Didn't exactly have the same kind of paths that some of these guys did growing up, not in the best environment and, being raised, having to, battle every day. So he can really resonate with guys and really relate to them. And I think that says a lot.
One final point, because we only have a couple minutes left, but one final point or thing that we wanted to discuss, what does, because in the future, there's going to come a time where Clemson's going to have a moderate year by their standards and expectations. And I think it's an interesting conversation because it's one that we haven't had for a long time with Clemson. What does a moderate year do in changing the perception of Clemson? Are they still going to be considered a top-tier program, or will that kind of temper the expectation? Because like I said, last year, Clemson had a lot of talent coming back, and they weren't even picked to win the division. So, a lot of people are like, what does Clemson have to do to get, the consensus across the country that they're a top-tier program? What do you think about that, Evan?
Well, I think it depends on what you want to define a moderate year as, because like you said, expectations before last season were it was going to be a pretty moderate year. Like you said, probably not going to be representing the division in the ACC championship. Basically, just playing a waiting game until sunshine can come in and start slinging it around the gridiron. And then we saw, our team last year, I think, exceed a lot of people's expectations, but not only winning the division, winning the ACC championship, making it to the playoff for the third year in a row. So if you define a moderate season as maybe not making the national championship, then as we saw with last season, doesn't really have that big of an impact. We still got Trevor Lawrence. We still got a lot of talent coming in off the recruiting trail. Now, if they underperform this year, I think it's even more disappointing because we're expecting how good we should be this year. We're expecting to win the ACC championship this year. So let's say we don't, and let's say we barely make a New Year's Six bowl. You win that still goes a long way. So I think it really depends on what you define a moderate year as and how consistent we are throughout that moderate year. Because we've seen, Ohio State make the playoff, win as a 4 seed, and then the next year not make the playoff, that kind of thing. And they're still at this national prominence. So I think based on what you define a moderate year as and how consistent we are even throughout maybe an underperforming year, that's going to go a long way down the road.
I couldn't agree more. Bradley, you got any final words? We got a couple of seconds left.
I think there's two paths Clemson could take: the Michigan State approach or the Oregon approach. Oregon had a bad year, fell apart. Michigan State had a 3-9 season, and they're back into the preseason top 10. So if Clemson can be the Michigan State after a bad year, I think that really could be important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with both points more. Well, it's been a lot of fun bringing you this edition of After Further Review. As always, thanks to WCCP for letting us hang out in the studio, produce another episode for you. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, everyone.